Okay, gentlemen, we're back on air. Good morning. In case you're just joining us, thank you for making time. We're watching Morning Prime on this 8th day of May 2023. Just taking a look at what has been encompassed in today's dailies, what's fresh off the press. And we have evaluated the top story of The Standard, where it's gone big with civil servants who are set to defy order on new taxes, where they mention that the deductions are a little bit too much and it amounts to over-taxation. And in case Parliament goes through with the proposals touching on Finance Bill 2023, they might take to the streets. And I'm joined by three gentlemen who are giving us their input on various issues, including what I've just introduced. Odoyo Owidi, who is the chair of the Lake Victoria South Waterworks Development Authority, equally joined by Professor Alfred Omenya, a governance analyst, and Professor Gitile Naituli. Right before the break, we're to get the sentiments from Alfred Omenya, and just before you do so, let's take a look at the editorial cartoon on the Daily Nation and The Standard just briefly. The Standard going big with what we saw over the weekend in Britain and the United Kingdom. We have a new monarch who is instilled, overseeing the United Kingdom. There we have it. If it could just come to our screens.
It's The Standard.
Yeah, that's The Standard, and we'll equally evaluate the editorial cartoon on the Daily Nation. And of course, it's a little bit interesting once it comes to your screen. You'll definitely see some of the medals on his attire, the military attire: colonialism, slavery, racism, divide and conquer, religious intolerance. Those are some of the medals on the King's attire right there, even as he's officially taken over, perhaps hinting at the dark ties the British monarch has, especially when you look at the African continent with links to colonialism and slavery right there. But that's all on The Standard. On the Daily Nation, we have something a little bit in tune with the Finance Bill 2023. And they've gone big with the hustlers who seem to be affected this time round. And once it comes to your screen, you'll definitely see the earnings from the employer are supposed to go to the hustler. But unfortunately, the hustler's hand isn't retaining those earnings. They seem to be passing through and heading to the taxman. That's the Kenya Revenue Authority. If we could have that cartoon, we'd definitely appreciate it, just for our viewers to be in line with what exactly I'm saying. Do we have it? Could we have it? Okay, so I guess, Omenya, kindly give us your take even as you react to what we've seen in the editorial cartoons today. Yeah.
No, thank you, Jesse, and I think it's quite interesting that the King of England, what was not being said there is that loudly, of course they said it, is also the head of Commonwealth. Oh, yeah. And we are part of the wealth that is common, that the king heads. Yeah. So we must salute His Majesty and congratulate the people of England and Commonwealth. And then of course there's what we call the realms. He's still ahead of a number of countries, head of state of a number of countries. I think there are almost 20, including Canada. People don't even know. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and then of course you have the smaller islands, all over the place. So this is actually a very powerful human being, and you wonder why this institution has stayed for quite some time. And I think the one thing that people don't realize is that governance globally is just the same. It changes a little bit, but it's been the same. Of course, the royalty, as part of royalty, the king, the royal family actually has, in terms of land ownership on earth, they're the biggest single owners of land. I think the land runs into millions of acres.
In the United
It is not,
Kingdom.
yes. Globally, even in Kenya, actually, they do own a lot of land. So wealth and power, are actually quite intertwined. And yes, we wonder how a modern democracy like the UK, would actually have this. Of course, it is important for cultural continuity and so on. Really, we also have our kings here. We have the King of Wanga, and others, Eswatini kings and so on.
Yes.
Yes. So I tell people that when it comes to matters of power and governance, it turns like the Titanic. It does not change overnight. Yes, so the monarchy is here, is part of the English history, it's part of our own history, include the good, the bad, and the ugly, including all those slavery things that we're talking about, which is true. But on the other hand, I think we should be ready that this will stay for quite some time. Of course, it's lost its power in between, but I think it does provide good cultural anchorage, which is the direction they're pushing, so that even within the Commonwealth, it's shown that we are people with a common history. And that common history does not include slavery and this exploitation that happened, in the continent. On the other hand, people are raising these issues, and governance thrives in that tension. People should also not forget that they were oppressed by this same king and so on. But whatever they do, it was their king. The king oppressed them, including the Mau Mau that unfortunately, we just lost Mukami the other day. That tension is there. So people should not tire at pointing out the vagaries of regimes like these ones, even as the regimes continue staying in place. But the nature of governance globally, whether we like it or not, is power, and that power is intricately intertwined with wealth. In this particular instance, landed wealth. In fact, it's a landed aristocracy that ruled England for very many years. Yes, so these are things that we need to be alive to, rather than taking a simplistic view that, because somebody offended you in the past, a powerful person, you can disband the institution and then start dancing in the streets of Nairobi. Even us will not allow you, who are oppressed, whose grandfathers were oppressed by the same king. But long live the king, and congratulations to the English people for appointing the king.
And we equally need an input on the editorial cartoon, which you can see on the screen right now. Perhaps you can take a look at it.
And yes, I think what is good and Kenyans must appreciate is that the landed class in Kenya have not transformed themselves into a kingdom. So the president just left, and now he's a common person being harassed. And the current one, is not a king. That may also
I get you.
Of course, this one we're talking about when it came to the matter of taxation.
Yes.
And again, I think government needs to listen. The voice of the people is very, like they say, is the voice of God. When everyone seems to be complaining, then it's time to listen. That's the time to bring in the wise people around you, like we're saying, and ask that what is actually going on. The president is very educated, just like I am, just like Naituli here, just like Odoyo. We are PhDs. We have gone to school properly. But remember what Odoyo said. That actually, even the media, they need to bring in hard-nosed economists to try to understand what's going on around this country, especially when it comes to the issues of taxation. We are saying, yes, we'll give some interesting highlights in terms of what's happening, but this is a hardcore economic issue where we need wise people, advising the president. So when people are complaining and so on, in fact, what I would have expected is Kenya's economic conference, where we bring in the biggest economic brains, to brainstorm about some of these issues, so that eventually, again, like Professor Naituli highlighted, we can harness their collective wisdom. Then our brains can become bigger. Otherwise, when we keep there, with one or two guys, be it D or the president himself or Njuguna, those people are too few to sort out the matter that we're dealing with here. The animal in the house is so complex that you need an economic conference. You need to harness different opinions from different parties and all those sort of things. That is what will make you wise. Otherwise, we cannot be experts in everything, but on the other hand, we can harness the wisdom of the people of Kenya, particularly to start with. This is one of the richest human resource you can ever get globally. At least that's another thing we don't appreciate. We don't just have long distance runners, but Kenyans are some of the sharpest human resource you can ever have. We need to start harnessing that and start asking ourselves, you know, the direction that we're heading to as a country, particularly in the medium to long term. Will this be the sort of situation that will make this country, you know, the new Singapore in Africa? And it's possible.
Interesting, and it's proper to note that that's why public participation is critical, especially in the current dispensation under the 2010 Constitution. Kindly react, Prof.
This is my take, and this is what I think this government can benefit from the UK monarchy.
Yes.
I think we need a king.
And as we go, and as we go to the negotiations with ASMIO.
Yeah.
The UK monarchy survived because they understood one thing. The whole objective of government is to survive. They survived. There was a King George during the Great Depression.
Right.
He was extremely flexible. But also originally, you see the UK, the first king of UK is actually came from France. He conquered. Right. Okay? So they launched a guerrilla war, Mau Mau style, and then by Robin Hood.
Right.
And that again, the king was flexible again because that's why the Magna Carta emerged. Right. So that flexibility is required here. Now this is what during Great Depression. During Great Depression, the Liberal Party was very radical, was almost like the Communist Party.
Yes.
So they won a very narrow majority at that time, and the people expected the King George, because he was conservative, to refuse them the opportunity to form a government. He allowed them to form a government. Then he persuaded the conservatives to join them in a government of national unity to revive the economy. Okay, to deal, because the economic situation was very bad, to deal with it. That flexibility allowed this monarchy to survive. Today we will not be talking about coronation in the UK, because there is no coronation in France, there is no coronation in Germany, there is no coronation in Austria, Hungary. You know, all those monarchies were toppled one after another because they were intransigent, they were in difficulty, they were not flexible. So what we can learn from the British is they always give way, the flexibility allowed. Now, of course, we can't argue this country also has been inflexible. No, we have always been able to sort out our problems, no matter how big. And therefore, I'm saying that the current government, because it look like it has quite a few tough guys, like Moses Guria and the company, they need to understand the value of flexibility.
All right.
Okay, because the idea is then when you are inflexible, you sometimes break.
True.
And we can avoid that by being flexible.
Very well put.
I think there are two factors that has made this monarchy survive all of these many years.
Right.
One of them is separation of this monarchy from the actual government.
Right.
That will, because there's nothing to fight with them about.
Exactly.
There's no taxation to fight with them about. There's no governance to fight with them about.
They contribute.
They are more or less ceremonial.
And they contribute. It's part of cultural heritage.
Yeah, and one other reason about
allowed himself. You see, the system was that he allowed to shape the power away in different times. They were not intransigents.
And one other thing that has made it survive is also the period it takes before even a coronation occurs. The last one was taken, I think, was it 1957?
Yeah.
And now is when we are getting the next one. Until people don't even really know what goes on into it. I was shocked at the elaborate ceremony that I watched on TV the other day.
Yes.
So I think this one will still last. As of the medals, these are historical. And this is where they were those many years ago.
And one interesting thing that was very clear even from the commentators, and I'm agreeing with both of you on this one quite vigorously, is even King Charles, that seems to be his focus, of flexibility. In fact, they were laughing that a Hindu prime minister was reading from the Bible. and if you look at it, there are all sorts of faiths. And this is the head of Church of England.
And Charles is an environmentalist.
Yeah, all these
different
faiths represented there, which is the reality of the time.
But I can tell you, if the king was the head of government, this thing would have been dead a long time ago. The British are the worst.
They give him the Magna
You
Carta.
play with them, they will change 3 prime ministers in 1 year.
Very, very true.
Yeah, they are very serious people. So the fact that it was eliminated from the government system, that's why.
So that it becomes part of the culture.
Yes. So it's just a cultural thing. It is ceremonial.
Okay. They were clever enough to allow that, bring in the Magna Carta, create the parliament. They were clever enough during the Depression to also give way and persuade the Conservatives to have a government of national unity so that they can get out of a very difficult economic situation. Point is, it is very clever to be flexible.
They are like ombudsman scenario here. I don't know how we can get into this, Prof. You probably can help us to get into something like this.
Yeah, exactly.
but really, to give us credit, I mean, of course, I mean, I know Kenya has gone through very difficult times, but it's interesting if you look at it. It's interesting compared to our neighbors. You see a bit of maturation of some institutions. I think, for example, the military. The fact that we separated the military altogether from politics, and it's working. And it's actually working.
They survive generations, they survive regimes, and we continue going.
Yes, and
just like this one.
And yes,
I think
despite
here you are just lucky.
Despite the hard-nosed things that we are talking about, you know, there are a few things. I mean, you look at governance across the region. Kenya is terrible. I don't want us to get into the Moi time that we are saying we are an island of peace. No.
Yeah.
We can do better. This is not to say that we can't do better. But on the other hand, I think also we need to recognize a place, you know, areas where we've actually made progress, including that election that we're talking about. Friends of mine in Germany and the UK told us, we've never seen this, where votes are actually being announced on screens for everyone to see. We are talking about first world. They didn't have that. Yeah. So yes. I mean, there may be a few issues here and there. In fact, for me, I'm not one of those opening the server people. But on the other hand, we need to appreciate so that we don't throw the baby with the bathwater.
Okay. True.
Yeah. There's some positives that happen. The fact that we can have civilian governments, change them every 5 years. You know, kick out our MPs, kick out our president, and whatever he likes, and so on. I mean, if this matures into a good democracy that can also deliver for the people, I mean, the potential of this country is going to be very, very huge.
Okay. So, gentlemen, I think that's enough with the editorial cartoon. Let's cross over to something, because we're talking about conservatives and the robust parties across the Atlantic? Anyway, back home, let's talk about Jubilee Party just briefly, because I can see them on page 8 of the Standard, all to do with the infightings. And the big headline today is Jubilee Party infighting escalates as ex-MP 6 crucial documents. You'll have it on page 8 of the Standard right there. And just to take you through what exactly happened in the previous past, of course, we've had two factions. One called for an NDC, I think May 22nd, led by Uhuru Kenyatta, former president. And on the other side, we have the interim president, according to the other faction led by Kanini Kega, where Sabina Chege seems to have been voted in to lead that other faction. As we talk about the longevity of political parties in the country, equally add your take on the infightings we're seeing here, because an ideal situation would be Jubilee Party metamorphosizes to ANC level in South Africa, CCM perhaps in Tanzania, but we have a history of political parties sort of breaking down right after the party leader who might have been the president leaves office. So how can we get to a place where we are actually, you know, dealing with party ideologies, not looking at parties as special purpose vehicles? Yeah.
Let me tell you about political parties in Kenya particularly. They cannot, even ODM has survived because the leader has never been president.
Correct.
Today, ODM is funded to the tune of $500 million every year or more. 300 million political parties funding, almost 200 million contribution by elected leaders and other donations, but does not even have a headquarter. Because it is all these parties are briefcase.
Yes.
They are special purpose vehicles, and they'll remain so until further notice.
How can we change that? Is it possible?
The ruling party today is only 2 years old or thereabout. And it is the largest party in the country.
As it sounds, yeah.
And I don't see it going beyond 10 years. After that, it will go. Because nobody wants to invest in political parties, because political parties in Kenya belong to individuals. In fact, in the place where I come from, they believe the political party which they follow belongs to one individual, and he can give direction on anything, and is above the law in it. And if you want it to compete it, tengeneza yako, you own it. And that explains why they don't have any fixed boards. In fact, beyond the headquarters here, they have no offices elsewhere. Anybody, an MP will go and paint some house in the streets and say that is the office. No rents paid, no employees in it. It is just a billboard. So that's how parties in Kenya work, and that is how they go. They are not even accountable to the people. They don't even account for the monies they receive. They are businesses.
When I look at Jubilee, something scares me about the people in the Mount Kenya region. You notice that the only people fighting in the country is only the Mount Kenya. It's only Kanini Kega, Sabina Shege, Moses Kuria, Keoni. This is unfortunate because I see a lot of peace in the Rift Valley. I see a lot of peace in Nyanza. In terms of community, but these fellows are fighting. So you begin to try to look at history and see whether there is something wrong with the Kikuyu nation, because even in the Mau Mau War, there was plenty of Kikuyu traitors. In fact, more Kikuyus killed each other than they killed the British, because there were plenty of traitors. Okay, it looked like the capitalistic nature in central Kenya. It can make it very easy for them to be colonized by other communities. Because capitalistic nature means more selfishness, means my stomach first before I think about my brother or before I think about my sister. So this thing is setting a very bad picture, because let's take it, Uhuru was not a strong leader, okay? But culturally, we should respect him. We should respect the former president. We should not bear him naked to the rest of the Kenyans. So what is happening here, by sitting down and they say Safina Chege replaces Uhuru Kenyatta, what exactly are you telling everyone? So what I see in Jubilee is not just about the party, because my friend here is right. Party with no ideology. We don't have parties, really. We have individuals who we follow in the name of the party. Because the party is supposed to stand on its own. It's supposed to have people believe in it because of its policies.
We are going concern.
So what he's saying is correct. But for me, I'm looking at something much deeper here. And there is something going wrong with the people of Central Kenya. Okay? I don't know whether you bring the other eastern sides together, but something... I saw something quite interesting when this lady called Sakwa, or what was her other name, the Luya lady, when she was removed from National Youth Service, and the Luya leaders were up in arms. I've never seen in Mount Kenya people up in arms. When any of them
to defend their own.
I've never seen that.
Okay.
So I see there is a weakness here, which if they are not careful, they are going to be the equivalent of drawers, hours of wood and drawers of water for the rest of Kenya. Because for you, even to be a good Kenyan, you first need to love your community to some extent. Because if you don't love your community, you can't love us. So me, I have no problem with the route of employing the Kalenjins the way he is doing, because after employing the Kalenjin, he will also employ us. Because he has demonstrated love for his community.
Okay, so he can extend it.
So he can extend it.
But equally, I'll have to pose this question, because you've mentioned Uhuru, just briefly before we cross over to Omenya. Should he exit the political stage? Because that has been the talk in terms of, 6 months after leaving office, in order to get your retirement packs, perhaps exit your party leadership position.
No,
should that be the case?
It will never be the case, because once Uhuru ceases to be president, he becomes an ordinary citizen, subject to all the rights under Article 38 and Article 27.
Right.
Okay, equality before the law. So this idea that a retired president should exit politics, he needs to cease. Unless you are telling us when you stop being president, then you are no longer a citizen of the Republic of Kenya. Because if you are still a citizen, all those rights should be available. to you.
Okay.
So they are not being fair to Uhuru Kenyatta. Okay? I think Uhuru Kenyatta has been an extremely weak president, but for me, he has all the right, which other Kenyans enjoys. So the idea of targeting him and making him a primary target of radical, primary, because I mean, who is Chege to replace Uhuru Kenyatta if you ask me? This is not right.
Okay.
We need to respect the former president. Okay. He did his job, and he deserves to be respected. Right. Just like we respect the existing president, and we respect him also after he leaves. So what is happening here is very childish for these fellows in Central Kenya, and I think somebody needs to talk to them because they are not being good examples to young people in Central Kenya.
Yeah, thank you. I think let me pick it up from there. I just want to make two brief points about this. That yeah, people say outside there that former presidents should not, take part in politics, and they say that's the law, but somehow they never quote it. Which law is that one that bars the former presidents, from taking part in politics?
His retirement
there's
benefits.
Nothing like that. We have a law called the Presidential Retirement Benefits Act. That act only says that the president shall play advisory role. It does not. That act does not say anything in negation. It does not say what the president shall not do. It only says that the president plays advisory role. And that's it. And that's partly why people who say that there is no law in Kenya that bars the president from taking part in politics. There isn't. It doesn't exist. If it exists, you tell me the act.
Because you are offending the rights.
And actually quote it. That there is no such an act in this country. We have the Presidential Retirement Benefits Act that basically says the president shall play advisory role. And rightly so. Because as senior statesman, that is what we expect him to do. But that's not the point that I wanted to highlight. I think my colleagues have highlighted quite a bit about these cannibalistic parties that either eat themselves or are eaten by their former owners when they leave office. Yeah. And some are inherited father to son. Like sadly, the one that's surviving, like Kanu, was handed over to the son. But the bigger message that I wanted to say, and this concerns me, Jesse, and my colleagues here know, we talk, in fact, both are excellent friends, actually, and I really appreciate the sort of contribution we're making here. I was at the university. When I was at the university, I was a pretty good student. And I was nurtured, I was encouraged to become a university member of staff. As a young undergraduate, I was built that way. We see this in churches, identifying people and building them. We see this in families. We used to see this in families, where you know that this one has talent, and we build them. But my concern currently is that we've lost all these values. We are not building any institution. We are not building families. We are destroying them. We are not saying, look, this young man may be able to take the family business ahead, or even be a good leader in the family. We are not building communities. We are destroying them. Whenever you see, and although he speaks about this articulately, you see a young person with potential, you go with a hammer to destroy them. We are not seeing this being done in political parties, where we are nurturing the next generation leaders. Yeah. If anything, somebody like Odeyo here, whom I know, really, I know Odeyo very well. And these are people, when he's talking here, he's not just telling you his whole story. These are people who've suffered simply because they're competent. Simply because, they're strong and they hold particular positions. And they've not been tolerated instead of being built. And I think as Kenyans, we need to start thinking seriously. We are not building the next generation doctors. We are killing them. In fact, if you see an intelligent person, you say, this one is going to compete with me. We are not building them in political parties. We are not even building them in the newsrooms. We've turned into this huge cannibalistic society. We are even eating our own children and our own wives. Instead of Menya saying, my family will be strong if my wife is strong, if my children is strong, if my relatives are strong.
General culture is bad.
Exactly. If my mother is holding the family together, what do? I start fighting with my mother over my father's land. I start trying to find out why this woman is undermining me because she's bought property. Instead of celebrating her, I start trying to figure out who are the friends of my son, because he spoke to me the other day in a manner that only an adult should speak to me. Instead of celebrating that. And we're not doing that anyway. I can tell you, I am in the universities. I no longer hear professors saying that student has potential. How can we ensure that this student gets a scholarship and eventually comes back and continues this good legacy that we're doing? As a country, we need to introspect. We need to ask ourselves, at what point did we start destroying the best amongst us? At what point did we start celebrating when the best amongst us fail? At what point did we start getting these mediocre leaders, who've occupied, the ones who I was talking about? Some fellows with no brains who have been put in parliament who cannot even discuss the finance bill. And meanwhile, we know that in those same places where the guys have come from, we have got excellent staff. We've got people of ability proven over time, but we go after them with a hammer, so that we end up with charlatans and comedians, leading us in every single space where actually we have some of the best human resources in this country. So we need to really start rethinking about building. Honestly, what legacy will we have? Our legacy cannot be roads. Our legacy should be the Tom Mboya legacy. It should be what our friend in Equity is doing, building the next generation leaders. And we need to see this in the political space too. This cannibalistic thing has to stop. It has to stop.
So,
allow me to make a statement on the Sabina Chege Uhuru thing.
Okay.
I have observed the Kenyan politics and political parties. And my conclusion is political parties in Kenya that have donated a president and the president has retired, they are like used cartridges. Small children can pick them up and play around with them to extinction until they lose them in the river or in the forest and so on. That is what happened to PNU. That is what happened to the first Jubilee and URP. That was happened to NAK Kenya. That is what happened to KANU. Some small boy will pick the used cartridge, play around with them, lose them in fire. That's it. So to think that Uhuru Kenyatta would still come back and run Jubilee to some usefulness, it's not there. What Uhuru Kenyatta is trying to do, Uhuru Kenyatta was not a politician, was not a presidential material. Uhuru Kenyatta was a businessman. He ever thought business. A man who would build a standard gauge railway from Mombasa, bypass the capital city into his farm and make 3 rounds in his farm and stop it there. That is not a presidential material. A president who would think of taking over whole business industries and then kill the competition, that is not a president material, that is a businessman.
Now that you say that, that's why I'm arguing that we really don't even we don't have a debt problem.
Yes.
We only have a debt problem because the leadership is not willing to confront the mistakes which were made. You see that railway cost us over 400 billion?
Yes, correct.
But remember that contract was signed by the Nusu Mokate government at around 150 billion, all the way to Malaba.
Yes.
So when Uhuru Kenyatta came in and Jubilee came in, they opened.
And you spoke about that, yeah.
Yes, they opened for negotiations. Now, well, this is what I'm saying. If you go to the central bank statistics, they inherited about 2 billion from Quebec, Jubilee administration. So they borrowed 6 point something billion to bring it to 80 point something trillion. Okay, they inherited about 2 trillion. Now, when you go and look year by year on the budget, which is the law that allows government to consume, there is budget on the recurrent side of that law for paying debts. When you add all those in debt payment over the years, you get 5.6 trillion. Meaning that if now the debts were being paid, you deduct that 5.6 from 8.3 trillion, meaning that now we should be having less than 2 trillion in debt.
Yes.
Now it's like we have never been paying a single cent.
Yes.
Because the debt has been increasing while we are still being paying. What have we been paying? These questions are not being asked. Okay? They are not being asked. When again you go to the central bank and you look at the debt themselves, authorized debt, authorized by parliament, and unauthorized. We have unauthorized debt of 4.1 trillion. Again, because the law says money is only borrowed for a project, can you tell us which project this?
4.1 trillion.
And again, nobody is following though. So we are paying debt. That's why I'm saying if this government is zeroes in on this,
Right.
they zero in on this, we don't have a debt problem. We only have a debt problem because we have agreed to sanitize.
Let me make another observation on that standard gauge railway, because I studied it. You know, when we built the first railway, a reserve was left of 120 meters for its improvement in the future.
Yes.
I once talked to a Chinese contractor, and I asked him, how would we extend this to Kisumu? He told me, you know, this railway you built here, the amount building it was enough to take it from Mombasa to Kisumu plus change.
Yeah.
Because, first of all, you should have not bought land. It should have been on the
Use
old railway line.
Yes, the old one.
Number two,
And with the reserve, even if
on the old railway line,
yeah.
there was already excavations had already been done, backfilling had already been done, soil stabilization had already been done. You're just coming to lay the new railway line, and you would have used less than that money to take the railway line from Mombasa to Kisumu. But because the president was hell-bent in taking a railway to his farm,
Not
the
the
railway has,
they wanted money.
it has not passed through Nairobi. That railway line has not passed. From Lolongo it goes to
And they bought
Naivasha.
land all the way from,
And they bought land
from
all the
Mombasa
way.
From Mombasa.
to Naivasha. Land that we didn't need. In
Then
fact,
they wake up one day and tell
the
you,
money
Oh,
didn't
they-
go to the
you
railway.
know what people
The
don't
money went
understand?
to, in fact, it didn't even go to the land. First, the land was
the
bought,
landowners,
and it was
yeah.
bought at inflated prices.
Now, what the people did,
that's something
once
we spoke
they
about
knew
here.
the railway was coming, it was just to buy land in
same guys
anticipation,
and
the
wait.
same people,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
anticipation of government now buying.
Very, very true.
So, you see, we have threatened over the government, the Kenyan government, because it's a continuous thing.
Right.
It's not necessarily the Ruto government.
Yes.
We have never, you see, the colonial government was an exploitative government.
Exactly.
It treated the Kenyans as people who need to be exploited.
Exactly.
That mindset has never left in the Kenyan government.
It doesn't change.
It has
It's the
never
same thing.
changed.
Correct.
The government sees people as people who need to be exploited,
Correct. And separate from them.
not people who need to be mirrored. So
The
your
protectorates,
mindset
Exactly.
has never changed. Just the same thing our security system was set up. The regular police was set up to protect the Muzungus. The anti-mission police was set up to collect the taxes
You remember
from the African. Again, you see that mindset, because I just remember one time during the coffee, I came from Nakuru. I mean from Mero into Nakuru. So before I turned to my home, they had put their own block. And they have collected vehicles. Because I came later than the coffee.
Yeah, yeah.
And when I came, without those people even checking who is in the car, because I was driving a Range Rover, they just removed their own block and I passed.
because you're on the other side.
So that
You are bound to be
mindset
protected.
has never, the mindset has never changed.
Has changed, yeah.
And this is what we need to work on. You see, when Ruto was campaigning, me, I saw change. I saw mindset change. Because he talked about the Azulas and so on.
Economy.
But once he entered there, once Ruto entered there, he became the same as subsequent governments, and I don't see him changing that, because I think the culture will not allow him, even if he wanted to change.
Prof, when
But it's interesting that
when somebody is breathing on your neck the way he's
the
ever on the
exploitative,
streets, you
language.
definitely have no
See,
time
that
to think
thing,
about change.
You can't think. The culture.
You can't think.
That
Yeah.
No,
exploitative language
but,
because
but when Azimio is breathing on his neck, it becomes so difficult.
now that
Azimio,
now
no,
that you
Azimio.
mentioned that,
Okay, Prof.
now that
briefly,
you mentioned that exploitative bit,
Yeah.
you know, Kenya was to be exploited, and you remember what we had initially was not even a government; it was a company, Imperial British East
Yeah,
Africa
it was a company.
But now it hurts that that somebody is telling us. In fact, Rigathi Gachagua, the deputy president, is telling us that this government is also a company, reminding us that Kenya was set up. A company was set up to exploit Kenya by the English, and now another company has been set up by the Ruto Rigathi government to exploit Kenya, and they've been telling us it's a company, it has shareholders,
and let me tell you
there are
the
people with
danger.
no shares. Their role is to
I think that was just an example.
so that they can be exploited.
No, but the people are not
It was
seeing
just
that
an
language.
example.
That language we need to run away from.
Kenyans need to see why that language is so dangerous.
That language is dangerous.
It's going to make election a life and in death matter. Because if it's when a government is formed, it's supposed to be a government of the Republic of Kenya. And Article 10 and Article 232. Or what it pertains to inclusivity. Article 135 mandates the president to tell us every year what he's doing to unite us.
Correct.
Now, once we say that is not necessary, these are the people who own the government, you don't, we are making the next election a life and death affair.
Yeah. But let me ask this critically, isn't that, I mean, we're painting an ideal situation here.
Yeah.
But the reality is, whatever Rigathi mentioned might be true. The people who supported the idea, the plan, will be the ones to form government.
Yeah, rather we pretend.
Form government.
Government
has already been formed.
Yes.
It's already been formed.
Yeah.
You cannot tell me that now you are not going to employ somebody. I mean, in fact, that's why we say don't politicize civil service.
Well,
civil service
is if you didn't support,
if you didn't vote, we can now not
bother even to apply when we advertise
for any position.
So in which case then they can just nominate. You don't even need the
I think
what we are saying is the risk. The risk we are taking is that the next election, because you need to form your own company, it may be a do or die affair.
Okay, true.
Okay,
Yeah.
and we need to avoid that.
Yeah.
We need to avoid. That's why the new constitution is very clear on balances, ethnic balance, regional balance,
Correct.
people with disability. The idea is that inclusivity makes us a nation.
Correct.
Okay, regardless of who wins the election.
Correct.
Once we lose that,
Correct.
we are going to have trouble. We are going to have even some people wanting to secede. Because they are saying, why should I pay tax to a company?
I think we are over-roasting Rigathi.
We are advising Rigathi.
What Rigathi said, Rigathi was just giving an example.
No, I agree.
But he keeps giving it.
Let's give him time to explain.
Of those people who are directly appointed by the president. Within the civil service, I don't think that would be there. Jobs are advertised, qualifications are put there, and people go through interviews and they get appointed. However, this one's of forming a government is by the winning political party. But providing services to the people, everybody must get equal services. Even on Homa Bay, they are getting it. Even in Kisumu, they are getting it.
Well, we know they are getting it because there is a devolution.
Yes.
But
so I think we are...
No, but in the president's defense, he's made a political trip to Nyanza.
Not even trip.
Yes.
There is shovel on the ground doing work.
So it's not just political rhetoric.
The point you are making here is that when you are in power, be careful what you are saying. Because you may translate that into a culture. Or some other people may actually act.
And in this
I do agree with you, but as you
the deputy president says it repeatedly. I don't think you help the deputy president's case by encouraging him to be making such stupid.
Okay.
But you see, again, as we advise the government and the president, we should also advise the opposition on the same lines. Because there is an opposition which is teaching its stronghold bad manners that you only support them. If you don't support them, they will even remove you from an assembly where you are elected to cane you out there on the door as the people who elect you watches.
Let's speak about that.
That is bad manners.
So political.
In Migori, they removed 6 MCAs from the county assembly and beat them in public because they attended a presidential function in Migori.
You know,
in Manzoni, an MP was thrown out because he had attended a
intolerance.
We agree 100%.
Yes. So
there's bad manners.
That's political bad manners.
There's bad manners in the rotten oranges, just as there are bad manners in government. You see, it's not either or.
We need tolerance.
Yes. We need tolerance. We need good leadership across board. It doesn't matter whether. Of course, I mean, if anything, I think the opposition have also demonstrated real poor leadership and
Prof, and that tells you one thing.
Yeah.
That the leadership in the opposition has no intention of capturing the presidency. Because they are hell-bent on only keeping their stronghold in their basket. They don't care what happens with others. When UDM, the whole team, defected to Kenya, they never said anything.
Yes.
When other communities say we are going to work with the government, they never say anything. But when Aluo, let me say so, says they are going to work with the government, or even greets the president, they tremble in rage. Because they already have a county of 6 million people. The Luos are 6 million strong, just like Denmark, that they rule. And the Luos have made them behave like they are not under the law. They operate above the law. They believe you cannot even arrest them when whatever they say or whatever they do.
But you see, a discussion for another day. We shall call it, we shall frame it, and Udo should be invited. We shall call it cult leadership amongst you.
It's political bad manners.
So, Odoyo, let me ask you, because according to Azimio, this is taking a turn towards the bipartisan talks, one of the pointers they raised is an end to the interference in the management and operations of political parties with a view of co-opting or paralyzing those particular parties.
Sure.
From where Azimio sit, if you happen to coerce members of parliament to move from the coalition party that sponsored them to parliament, then that is wrong.
I think Azimio should be the last group to complain, because this is a party headed by a person who, after the 1997 election, took a whole political party into Kanu, and they never went back to the people to seek a fresh mandate. And they remained there. Two of them were appointed ministers, and the one who became a secretary general of that Kanu, but they never went back for re-election. They shouldn't talk like that. This is also the person, just the last parliament, the 12th parliament, decided to do what they called a handshake. And they were all supporting another political party in its agenda, in the promotion of its values, and they never went back to the people. So when they come now, it is their turn to complain. I think they're getting it wrong. Kenya must have a country where everybody is treated equally. Azimio should be the last to talk about their people being there. In any case, they claim, in any case, they claim to have fought. In any case, they claim to have fought for freedom, for democracy. There's nothing that prevents me from moving from one political party to another. When I moved from ODM to UDA, they never complained. They are complaining because these people matter.
You know, Jesse, I spend my time in these newsrooms, actually, and it's on record. I spend a lot of my times, fighting the so-called handshake, because we knew that not this proposed one, the previous one, Uhuru and Raila, because it was very, very clear from the Building Bridges initiative that this was going to be an assault to a democracy.
Yes.
That it was going to undermine, basically the oversight role of Parliament itself and of the position also of a government. And that's what happened. Some of the things, bad manners that you're talking about, came from that particular point. I think my big challenge is that, we should not actually look at, we should not spend our times looking at bad manners in Azimio as a justification of bad manners in UDA or in Kenya Kwanza. Bad manners are bad manners. And Azimio is notorious for bad manners. And yes, we call them out for that. But on the other hand, I think Kenya Kwanza government should also stop their bad manners of buying these cheap Azimio members of parliament, to their side, because it achieves the same thing. It undermines our democracy. It undermines our
buying is a rumor, honestly.
And well, I mean, whatever you call it,
then it has to be that, because I can't see why you will be elected in this party, and then after election, one day after, you can't. No, this is Kenya, my friend.
But that is a bigger point that Odoyo was making, that I think we shouldn't lose track of. That for the sake of democracy, really people should actually stake. You have a role wherever you are. I mean, in this country, it is not just about, I mean, the reality, the way we've organized our constitution and our governance, all these people have a role. And that's why nobody will stop paying you because your party is not in power. These guys are paid to do these things. They're paid to budget, they're paid to oversight, they're paid, and it's a good thing to do it. And prepare yourself. I mean, if you're out of government, you have all the time to organize yourself and prepare yourself, to govern in future. And create the systems, create the structures, talk to the people. There's work to do, even in the minority.
Okay.
But we have this mentality that as long as you're not in government, your role should be to find out whichever way, whether it's through the handshake or through being bribed or whatever it is, that you must be on the other side, because that's where people are eating. That's the problem. People are not doing work, they're just focusing on eating.
Okay, we have to take a break, gentlemen. But as we come back, I'll pose a question to our friend right here, Odoyo. We are putting hope in parliamentarians when it comes to the finance bill. If what we've seen happen in Parliament is the status quo, is this hope placed on shaky grounds? That's number one. Number two, as we come back, we'll take a look at some of the solutions perhaps to the parliamentary route we've taken as a country, the parliamentary or the presidential system rather, where I think I came across an editorial